Hello and thank you for joining us today. I am Garima Batra, Content Marketing Specialist at cloudlimbs.com, and I'm excited to moderate this event. In the next 30 minutes, our speaker, Martha Hernandez, will discuss what it takes to get your biobank ready to meet the various requirements of ISO 20387 and how a biospecimen management software can help meet the accreditation requirements with ease. Now, let me quickly introduce Martha. Martha is a scientist at cloudlimbs.com. Before beginning her professional career as a scientist with us, Martha spent 12 years working as an analytical chemist in various industries from clinical diagnostics to forensics in Mexico. Martha loves to attend trade shows and as she gets an opportunity to meet and interact with new people and thought leaders from different industries. Getting the job done in less time is a priority for her personally, as there was a time when she would spend over 14 hours per day manually filling in the logs and typing the results, wasting valuable time and making mistakes due to exhaustion. When she's not traveling for work, Martha loves to dance and play with her pups, Homer and Benito. Martha loves to pose with her pups and share pics on her social media accounts. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few points so you know how to participate in today's webinar. All attendees will be in mute mode throughout the webinar. This is an interactive webinar, so we encourage you to ask questions anytime during the presentation by entering them in the chat box. The questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. We will take as many questions as time permits, but we do want to end today's presentation on time. So if we are unable to answer your questions today, we will get back to you on email. Now let's welcome Martha.
Thank you, Garima, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Marta Hernandez. I'm a scientist at Cloudlimbs, and today I'm going to talk to you about navigating through ISO 20387 accreditation challenges using a biospecimen management software. So let's start by defining what a biobank is. Well, a biobank is a laboratory facility that accepts, processes, stores, and distributes samples and data for use by research institutions. So the biobanks manage biological samples like blood, tissue, saliva, plasma, cells, and their related information. So they can be used by a third-party research institutions for research purposes. So the role is to store these collections and to keep biospecimens in a safe physical location while maintaining quality so that the researchers can access them and they associate data with these biospecimens. Some biobanks are specific for a particular disease such as cancer. So these biobanks, to operate effectively, need trained and competent staff. They must follow SOPs to manage and store samples while maintaining their quality. So the biobanks also should maintain sample records and documentations for all the biobanking activities for future reference and for historical continuity for internal and external audits. So now we know that biobanks store several types of biological samples, but also they store their related information. And this data could be clinical history that give us information about the lifestyle of the patient, and physical exam with the doctor, results from laboratory tests, demographics. This include all the genders, age, ethnicity data. Family history. Well, with this data, the researchers can get the health information from the family, like the grandparents, the parents, the children. The biobanks store also the sample collection procedures. With this, the researchers get information about the preparation of the patient, the collection, the processing, and storing of the specimen, and informing consent. With this, the biobank are the responsible for manage this type of consent that is too important in clinical research to meet established compliances. And the goal of this informed consent is to enable competent individuals to decide from themselves whether to participate in research. And also, the biobanks are responsible for manage data safety and protection to be able to share information adhering to these international standards and compliances. So, as we can see, the biobanks play an essential role in biomedical research. This serves as a library for researchers. The time and resources needed to recruit new participants for each research study are greatly reduced because the samples and the corresponding medical information are available in just one place. However, logistically speaking, this could be a nightmare because all the samples and data must be always kept safe and secure, and the staff must be capable of ensuring their safety. And also, to protect the privacy of donors and to demonstrate their competency, the buyback must comply with regulatory guidelines. And another major challenge for this biobank is that the biological samples are temperature sensitive and may be affected by environmental changes like the humidity, the light, the oxygen levels. So the biobank must build infrastructure and deploy monitoring systems to maintain sample quality. It is necessary also to track the samples through their life cycle to avoid any problems like misplacing samples. So by complying with the standards like ISO 2387, biobanks can assure the sample quality, integrity, and traceability through their sample life cycle. So now let's understand what is ISO 20387. So, what is ISO? First, well, we know that it's the International Organization for Standardization, which publishes international standards to maintain quality, safety, and efficiency in a wide range of industries. ISO recently published a new standard specifically for biobanks, this ISO 20387. In response to the constantly growing role of biobanks within the life science industry. So, the ISO 237 covers requirements for all aspects of managing a biobank, including the structural, personal facilities, processes, and equipment. And it also covers the quality management system and sample handling from collection, preservation, transportation, distribution, and traceability of these materials. So the next question will be why ISO 20387? Why will biobanks want to achieve it? Well, for a biobank to obtain accreditation, it must be evaluated by an external, independent, and impartial agency to evaluate the competence and consistent operation of the biobank. So, the benefits of a biobank being accredited make any effort worthwhile as it promotes confidence. It increases the confidence of researchers in the biobank's ability to provide these high quality fit for purpose samples. Also, they assure the reliability since research must ensure that the samples have been properly stored and maintained through their life cycle and ensure that the experimental data coming from these samples are reliable and can be published in any journal. This is really important for researchers. Also, the accreditation provides valuable information to the biobank on how can further improve and streamline its processes, potentially reducing costs. And at the same time, the accreditation potentially improves efficiency, minimizing the process errors. Now, the next question will be how to achieve it. Well, let's just start by saying that ISO 20387 is as most at ISO standards, speaking about the formatting. So, the section 4 contains the general requirements for a biobank, and this is all about the procedures addressing the biobanking of each type of sample and associated data stored. So, also, it includes that The biobanks must document information relevant to activities, to processes, and procedures. This is all about documentation. And clause 4.2 is about impartiality of the staff. The biobank will be responsible of the impartiality and shall not allow any internal or external pressure to compromise. So they have to identify the risk of this impartiality and an ongoing basis and take measures to eliminate or minimize such risks. Clause 4.3 is about confidentiality. This is called the confidentiality between the customers and the biobanks, and of course the staff and all the involved in the biobank activities. So the confidential information and proprietary rights of providers, donors, recipients, and users must be protected by the biobank, particularly during this storage and transmission of data. So the biobank will inform the donor how their privacy and confidentiality are protected. So biobanks can take advantage of informatic tools such as a biobanking LIMS to securely manage their data. So, how? Well, a LIMS forces staff to authenticate themselves using a two-factor authentication mechanism, an OTP and password-based login for secure this data access. So it also locks accounts temporarily on account of multiple failed login attempts. So this increases the security when handling confidential patient or donor information. And to safeguard and protect health information of patients, LIMS anonymize sensitive patient data and assign role-based protect health information access rights to the staff. The sensitive mask data can be viewed only by authorized personnel, and each time an authorized person views or make any changes of this protect health information, the activity is recorded in the audit trail. So this is really useful for audits because sometimes the external auditors can request a protect health information audit report at any time. So you have here automatically in your LIMS. You don't have to cross dates, cross hours, or change the signature. No, everything is automatically here for you. Now, the section 5, it's about the structural and organizational requirements. This is all about your staff and how they fit together in a biobank. They have several procedures to assure the staff competence. The biobank should specify the responsibility and the authority and the interrelationship of personnel who manage, perform, validate, or verify work affecting this biobanking output. So LIMS helps you because the biobank staff can be granted or revoked access to activities or information based on their role in the organization's hierarchy. And also, the biobanks can assign rights to the staff for accessing samples and donor information based on the roles. We can see here that the biobank manager has all the rights to view, to create, to edit, delete, and manage patient and sample information, but other personnel of the staff only can view all that information. So with the LIMS, biobanks can assign rights to the staff for several activities, not only patients and samples, also procedures, tests, documents, and everything. You can have control of who access the information in your biobanking. Section 6 contain resource requirements, and these have clause for personal. This is about the competence and training requirements. It contains several procedures related to the training and competence of your staff to manage your biobank. And you have to ask yourself this: is your biobank staff competent to develop all these biobanking activities? How can you prove it? Clause 6.3 is about facilities. This includes all the facilities dedicated to the biobanking activities and monitoring the environmental conditions. This is how the biosafety and biosecurity of biological materials are associated and are maintained and also the separation between areas to prevent all this cross-contamination. Clause 6.4 is about external provided processes. This is when biobanks decide to use externally provided preservation, storing, or authentication activities. And 6.5 is about the equipment. This is all about the traceability of your equipment. You have to ask yourself, when was the last calibration of your equipment? When was the last maintenance? What SOP was used? So, how can LIMS help to answer all those questions? Well, first, to manage personal training, LIMS ensure that only trained personnel handle biological material, data, and hazardous chemicals and samples. In addition, the task can be assigned based on the evaluated competence. We can see here some training topics, and we can see who was the personnel, who was the staff who attended this training topics, and we can also make a matrix of the scores to quickly visualize who is competent in some topics and who is not. Your lab manager can schedule extra training for the incompetent staff and can assign the task only to the competent staff. So, facilities are procedures to maintain fitness for the intent purposes, biosafety and biosecurity of biological materials and associated data. This is when you have to control the temperature or the humidity in your facilities, your installations. And the separation between areas to avoid cross-contamination, as these are procedures to check what barriers you're going to add to your to your biobanking areas, and the procedures that your staff will follow to avoid this cross-contamination. So, to manage external supplies, LIMS can help to manage inventory items purchased from external vendors and their current quantity. You can set a reminder alarms for the replenishment of inventories items all on time. Here we can see a list of reagents and consumables, and we can see if they are expired, if they are not, who is responsible for them, where are their storage of this, if there are freezer, if there is a cabinet or what. So you have all here in your inventory module. And to manage equipment calibration and maintenance, LIMS can help to track their calibration and manage the maintenance data. It can be configured to notify the biobank managers day before it is time for the calibration of the maintenance, enable managers to call the technician and have all equipment taken care of up to date to any audit or to the very good functionality of this equipment. Let's see what is the section 7. This is all about the process requirements. And it includes the collection. And this is when the biobanks are responsible for collecting their samples. They shall define all the document information related with this collection. And the most important thing here is that they must include the date, the place, the procedure of collection. The reception and distribution. These are procedures for accessing, receiving, and distributing biological material and data to their customers. About the transport of biological material, this is about the critical chain of custody for all this material from point of dispatch to point of receipt. The next will be the traceability of specimens. You have to ensure the traceability of all the samples through his lifetime. The preparation and preservation. These are procedures that should be in place for the preservation of specimens. So how does your biobank perform these activities? The storage. How does your biobank store the sample? For how long? Your biobank must have procedures for the storage and tracking of biological material, such as barcodes, to uniquely identify the biological material. Also, Section 7 speaks about quality control. The biobank must establish, document, and implement quality control procedures related to critical activities. And validation and verification of the methods. The biobank shall use validated or verified methods for critical activities at all stages of the biological material life cycle. But what are those critical activities? Well, this is, for example, when you splice samples, you have to make derivatives or aliquots. This must be carried out by a validated and documented method. Also, the management of information and data. So this clause established that the biobank shall define the required information and related data to biological material and shall have a system in place for tracking it. To control of non-conformity in output. So these are procedures for the management of output that do not conform to the SOPs of the biobank. So you, biobank, shall mitigate the impacts of these non-conformities and implement corrective actions and prevent the recurrence. Reporting requirements. So the biobank shall provide a report. Now, this must include the required information as agreed with the recipient. So it could be any way to report your results. And delete complaints. This is about establishing, documenting, and implementing procedures to receive, evaluate, and make decisions on complaints. So, LIMS helps you to manage samples. Yes, they LIMS helps you to associate unique barcodes with each samples, enable you to track the samples at any point in the sample life cycle. So you have a complete chain of custody of these samples. And yeah, to maintain the data traceability, LIMS helps you to maintain a trace log and track changes made with the date and time stamp along with the name of the person who made the changes. So this is really helpful because there are not any time travel issues anymore in your biobank with this audit trail feature, because we have it automatically. You don't have to cross date, to cross hour, to change signatures. No, automatically you have all your audit trail here in your LIMS. Also, a LIMS can help your biobank to mirror its storage inventory and locate the stored samples with ease. So with this, you can see exactly where your samples are located, which freezer, in which box, so you will always know where your samples are, so no more misplacing errors in your biobank. And you can also maintain a sample chain of custody of all the samples or aliquots through their life cycle to regulate their transfer from one custodian to another. So the transfer can be internal or it can be external, and a good LIMS can show the entire genealogy of a sample. Here you can see a sample and who had it and to whom it was transferred, and everything is automatically here in your LIMS. So now the section 8. This tells us about the quality management system requirements. Your biobank must have a quality management system that can support and can demonstrate the consistent achievement of the requirements of this standard. So it includes the document information. The biobank must identify the information that shall be documented and ensure that the documented information is appropriately created and updated. And they have to ensure that the documented information is appropriately controlled. And speaking about control, you have to control your documents and the related to the fulfillment of ISO 20387. So how do you control these documents? And also, how do you control the records? Your biobank must retain records for a period consistent with its contractual or legal obligations. So how do you track all these records? Also, actions. We speak about actions to address risks and opportunities. So this is about when biobanks must consider the risk and opportunities associated with the biobank activities and develop and implement and document action plans to mitigate such risks. And improvements. This is for the quality management system and for the biobanking itself. The biobanks must identify and select opportunities for improvement and implement any necessary actions. And speaking about actions, the corrective actions. What should be done if there is non-conformity? Is an action required, and how to decide? Well, you have to put all this in a procedure in the section 8. Internal audits. Well, the biobank should plan, implement, and maintain an internal audit program, including the frequency, method, responsibilities, planning requirements, and reporting. So the quality management system must implement these internal audits, even though if we as an analyst, we hate that. And the quality management reviews. The biobank top management shall review its quality management system at planned intervals to ensure its continued effectiveness. So, how LIMS can help you with this? Well, helps you to manage all the documents, such as the standard operating procedures, and provide quick access to documents to all authorized users. So LIMS manage this internal and external documents, not only SOPs, also consent forms, quality management manuals, records. So the LIMS tracks the revision history of each document to ensure that the staff members access only the latest version. Remember, it has to be updated. And it also provides role-based document access rights to the staff, providing controlled access to confident documents. So now let's list the benefits of having a LIMS managing your biobank and how it fits with the requirements of this ISO 20387. Well, LIMS securely manage samples, metadata, donor consents. Assign role-based access to authorized users to safeguard this protect health information. Remember, security, confidence, and impartiality. It's the key here. Anonymize sensitive patient data to safeguard this protect health information. Confidentiality. Stores SOPs, control documents, and records digitally and securely. Also track samples and maintain a chain of custody. Traceability of your samples. Manage staff training and their competency. Schedule instrument calibration and manage maintenance data. Remember the traceability in your instruments. Maintain an audit trail. It's the key because you don't have to have logs with cross dates and cross hours in your biobank. That's not acceptable. Enforce authentication of key activities through digital signatures, and optimize freezer management and the sample utilization for not misplacing samples anymore. Now let's see biobank that it's accredited. An example, the Cornell Biobank was the first to be accredited under this ISO 20387 standard. And until today, the total number of accredited biobanks it's around 17 worldwide. So some accredited biobanks like Cornell collect samples from ill and healthy animals. The samples are then processed, cataloged, and provided to scientists around the world. And they follow a workflow that it's most like this. They identify the relevant cases that could provide valuable samples for future research, and they make the consent, they make the informed consent. Before the collection, the owners are informed of these requirements for participation and any risks associated with the collection of the samples. The owners have to give a written consent for this. Then they made the collection of the sample and they made the registration. So the participants and their samples are registered into the biobanking information management system along with its medical data. Then this information is anonymized, is de-identified to protect the privacy of the owners, and the animals are, and they are given a unique ID. And then the samples are labeled with barcodes. Then they process the samples, then they receive maybe a request for evaluation, they made this request preparation, and then they deliver the samples. And well, the quality management is essential in the maintenance and operation of a biobank. The biobank should be able to track each biospecimen, as this helps to manage this sample quality and the effective use for the sample in the future. So the quality systems should involve protocols, SOPs, verification, staff education, and training. So a good quality management plan can lead to higher quality samples and reproducible research results. That is the main goal in your biobank. So here, the attention to detail is the key. Each step of the workflow needs to be documented. So now you have an action plan to meet all the requirements of ISO 20387 and accredited your biobank. So you have to set up your process and define the SOPs. You have to start implementing best practices. You have to deploy a LIMS for data and quality management. This is the strongly recommended here. You have to select an accreditation body, apply for the accreditation. You have to train your staff for internal and external audits, perform an internal audit, and address issues identified in this internal audit. We strongly recommend it to participate in an external or a third party audit and take corrective actions if they are suggested by the auditors, and then get your accreditation. The next step will be maintain your accreditation, but that's another topic. So, in conclusion, what is ISO 20387 accreditation? Well, it's an important regulatory standard for biobanks. Why do biobanks need it? Well, to increase your confidence, to increase your reliability, and boost your efficiency in your biobank. And how biobanks can follow it with ease? Well, I strongly recommend it to deploy LMs. It's the easiest way. So thank you very much for your attention, and don't forget to put your questions in the chat box.
Thank you for that insightful presentation, Martha. Attendees, we have launched a short survey. I request you to take a moment to fill out the survey form that you see on your screen. We are now going to begin answering questions. As a reminder, you can still submit your questions through the chat box. We have received quite a few interesting questions, so let me move straight on to these. The first question we have from the audience is there any way to improve the quality of the samples? Martha?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Garim, I have to say it. Well, we know that for assuring the sample quality, well, it is important that all the staff members follow these predefined SOPs or standard operating procedures for any biobanking activities, from sample processing, from storage, transportation. So but it is not possible for the biobanking managers to keep an eye on each staff member at all times. It's impossible. They're not Superman. So, how can a biobank manager oversee various activities without being physically involved? Well, the solution is really simple, and it's implementing a LIMS, because the LIMS helps you to enforce this SOP compliances and detect any deviations, enable timely corrective actions to maintain this sample integrity. So LIMS can be the best assistant for your lab managers, for your biobanking managers.
Thanks, Martha. The next question I see is how long does it take to get the accreditation? Is there an estimated time?
Okay, well, this is a very common question to all the, even for us and for the accreditors. So, well, the time it takes to obtain this ISO 20387 accreditation for a biobank can vary depending on several factors, like the size of the biobank, the complexity of its operations, and the level of readiness of this biobanking quality management system. So, generally, the accreditation process can take anywhere from several months to a year or more to complete. So the timeline can be affected by some factors such as the scope of the accreditation or the availability of the resources or the competence of and experience of the biobank staff, and the most important, the documentation and evidence that is required by the accreditation body. So I can tell you on a specific time. So to get more specific estimate of this time, um, well, you can consult to an accredited certification body that provides these services. So this certification body can provide a detailed assessment of your biobank's readiness for this accreditation and develop a customized and personalized plan for the accreditation processes, and including, of course, this estimated timeline.
Thanks for answering that, Martha. I'm sure you get that question very often.
Yes, I do.
Moving on, someone in the audience wants to know the most renowned accreditors. Who are the most renowned accreditors?
Well, some of the renowned accreditors that we know and that we know and we consider that are the most of the best accreditors can be the American Association for Laboratory Accreditation, or the A2LA, or the ANSI National Accreditation Board, the ANAB, and well, for all of our friends in United Kingdom, it's the United Kingdom Accreditation Services, the UKAS, or in Australia can be the National Association of Testing Authorities. Those are the accreditors that we know and that are really renowned and are really important across the globe.
Great, great. All of them are household names in the industry.
Yes.
The next question is about the central management of samples. Someone from the audience is saying that their biobank has different areas with different types of samples. Can a LIMS help centrally manage all the samples and the associated data?
Well, yes, Garima, it is possible to centrally manage it with the limbs. So limbs can be your best ally um, to manage all your areas in your biobank. So that's the best choice.
Thanks, Martha. Attendees, you can still send us your questions by posting them in the chat box. And now I'm going to move to the next question, which is what are the aspects to consider regarding infrastructure in a biobank to be accredited by ISO 20387?
Okay, this is a very interesting question. So, well, the infrastructure in your biobank must be designed with the aim of international guidelines and complying with the local laws and regulations. So, this requires the use of safety procedures, including the use of personal protective equipment for all the biological processes and activities of cryogenic storage, and also, you must obtain validation from a third party of all the critical equipment, for example, the LN2 distribution system, or the vessels and the containers, the mechanical freezers, and the monitoring and these alarm systems. Also, for your biobanking limbs, and you have established a preventive maintenance contract with specialized suppliers for all the critical equipment and instruments of the biobank. So this, you have to designate a guard personnel for a 24/7 alarm intervention and establish a recovery plan of disasters. I remember biobanking when I was working several years ago that we have an additional location to move all these samples if they're having something, I don't know, a powered outrage or any other disaster. I remember a hurricane in Mexico that hit and cover everything in water in the laboratory that we were working, and it has his in-house biobanking as well. So we have to move all this of these samples to another location that we have and associate with us. So you have to have this recovery plan of disasters because you don't know when this can happen. So literally the roof fall off and floated everything. So we save all the samples because we had this recovery plan of disasters. So you should have taken everything this in account when you consider to accredited by ISO 20387.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Martha. An interesting question and an equally interesting response from you.
Thanks.
The next question also seems like an interesting one, and the question is, what are the acceptable temperature ranges for preserving samples in refrigerators and freezers? Is there a way to receive notifications immediately when temperatures exceed the acceptable limits in order to prevent damage to temperature sensitive samples?
Well, speaking about that, yes, well, it depends on your sample type. For example, if your sample is, I don't know, DNA or RNA, well, it can be stored, sorry, at minus 20 degrees Celsius to minus 80 degrees Celsius. So there are some scientific refrigerators that are typically operate from 2 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius, and freezers from minus 25 degrees Celsius to minus 10. And there are some others that are that I am very used to use. There are the ultra low temperature freezers that can be set from minus 50 degrees Celsius to 86 degrees Celsius, depending on the sample stored. So to prevent this damage to this temperature sensitive samples, well, it is really important to ensure that these temperatures in the refrigerators or the freezers are constantly monitored and maintained within these acceptable ranges. So there are various monitoring systems that are available that can provide immediate notifications when temperatures exceed the acceptable limits. For example, some refrigerators and freezers come with a built-in temperature monitoring systems that can use alerts when these temperatures go out of the acceptable range. So additionally, there are standalone temperatures monitoring systems that can be installed in the refrigerators and freezers to monitor these temperatures and provide alerts if temperatures go outside this acceptable range. So these monitoring systems may use various methods to provide alerts, such as visual alarms. They had a line on that can be tingling, some audible alarms that are the most common, the alert that sounds like an ambulance sometimes. So there are some email or text message alerts too. So LMs should be integrated with these temperature monitoring systems to centrally store current and historical temperature monitoring data. So it is important to regularly test the monitoring systems to ensure that they are functioning properly and providing accurate temperature readings. And also, it is recommended to have a backup power supply, such as a generator or the famous UPS, to ensure that these refrigerators, freezers remain operational during power outage or other disruptions. So the LIMS have all this data in the system automatically. So it's really important because sometimes in audits too, if a sample or it's audit, um, maybe the auditors can ask about the sample and said, okay, what was the range of temperature that was stored. So if they if you don't have all this data, well, it would be very bad for your audit. So a LIMS can with a LIMS you can check that, well, it was stored for a year, for example. In this year, all the temperatures were acceptable. So there are not question about the integrity of that sample. So that's important.
Right. Martha, we have a few more questions. One of them is it mandatory to get a LIMS to our system to get the 20387 license, or is it okay to use alternative systems?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it, Garima? I didn't hear it very well.
Yeah, the question is it mandatory to get a LIMS to our system to get the 20387 standard accreditation, or is it okay to use alternative systems? Is it mandatory to get a LIMS, or any alternative system is also okay?
Got it. No, it's not mandatory to have a LIMS to get this 20387 accreditation, but it is highly recommended. It is highly recommended. The LIMS will help you to, it's a very, very powerful tool that will helps you to get this accreditation. So because the limbs can can help you, and in it complies with all of the points that that we saw in the presentation.
Right.
But you can have another system or an alternatively thing that you can use, but we highly recommend the limbs.
Right. Martha, there's one more question, actually, a couple of them.
Mhm.
One of them is it possible to manage quality management system documents like SOPs, etc., through the Cloud limbs?
Yes, it is. We have a module that is specifically for documents, and you can manage any document, and not only documents, also records, all the, for example, the consents for the subjects, the informed consents, or any record that you have, any document, any paper, any quality management manuals, or all the training for the I don't know, exams that you test that you have through your staff. You can also storage there on the document model. So yes, LIMS helps you with all the paperwork.
The next question, Martha, is also about Cloud limbs. It is, does Cloud limbs include the generation of barcodes in the system?
Yes, yes, and it's really, really helpful for um, for managing all your samples, for tracking all of them. That is something that is that may be a problem in a biobank. It's this misplacing samples, or that you don't have the traceability, the complete traceability, because there are thousands of samples that you have in your biobank. So this system of barcodes helps you a lot because you only scan it, and you have all the traceability of the samples since the very beginning to the disposed, or the, I don't know, the transportation of the samples. And yes, the limbs helps you with this. But if you have also, that's another question that I have very, very often, because sometimes the biobanks have their own barcodes, and they said if they are compatible with the ones that generate our cloud limbs. And yes, yes, it is possible. We have also a system that it's external barcode, and you can add it there, so it's perfectly compatible with limbs.
Great, great. Martha, this would be the last question for today. Uh, is it required to have some other accreditations such as 15189, ISO 15189, CAP, etc., before someone goes for ISO 20387?
Well, the 15109, it's for clinical diagnosis. So this is this is for biobanking. So if you are only a biobanking, I think you can only apply for the 20387. But you have to check it with the accreditation body. But for us, and my understanding about these ISOs, they're kind of different, even if they have some similarities. But this 2037 is just for the biobanking, so you can go for it if you don't have the 15189.
Thank you, Martha. Thanks for that insight. Well, that's a wrap. That is all the time we have for today. Attendees, I'd like to thank all of you for your attention. Thank you, Martha, for the presentation and for answering all the questions from our audience. Attendees, if you have any questions, you can always write to us at support@cloudlimbs.com. Thank you and have a great day ahead.
Thank you. Bye bye. See you next time.